Hi guys, I am here to talk to you about your assignments this week. This is chapter 5, which is all about web design. I would like you to make sure that you read chapter 5. A lot of the things, not all of it, but a lot of the things that are covered in that chapter, the topics we've already talked about quite a bit, such as color or contrast or working with the audience that you're working with when you're developing a website. But a couple announcements. Your chapter 4 case study is due. Your About Me website should now have a fave icon and images. I am working on grading those and I will have them completed by Thursday. And if your grade isn't showing up by Thursday afternoon, please let me know and I will go back and check to make sure I release that. Your quiz number 4 is now closed, which was on images. I will release your grades in the next few days when I grade it. And also your background images lab assignment is due. So a couple of things to announce about the class. Some links that I've put up. I put up this 100 brilliant color combinations. I'm going to go ahead and open that and show you what it looks like. It is a website that has all of the information about the different color combinations we talked about. But then when you go down, it actually has 100 different types of color combinations. So this might help you for your next assignment that you're doing this week because you're actually going to work on creating a mock-up of a website, sort of a fake website for this assignment. But there are lots of different color assignments there for that link. As far as web design basics, your textbook is going to talk about that and also talk about navigation and site hierarchy. So just making sure that when you are working on your navigation for your website, you want to make sure that you don't have more than about 6 or 7 main navigation topics. And you want to make sure that your site hierarchy isn't too deep. So you should be able to get to the content that you want to get to within 3 clicks. That's sort of the rule of web design. So when you look at that chapter, it's going to talk a little bit more about web design basics and navigation and site hierarchy. I also gave you a link on where to find inspiration. So there's a couple websites, Design Seeds and Design Inspiration. And then of course, Pinterest and Twitter are always good places to go. I also have a link here for examples of websites and layout options. And this website is great to talk about good examples of grid-based web design. So when you're designing your web page, you want to really think on a grid. So you want to think in blocks, in rows and columns. And sometimes it's nice to mix the grid up a bit. So in this example, you can see that there are 5 columns and 3 rows, but they took 2 of those columns and merged them together, which makes us see this great circle. And that's where our eye goes. So when you're working on your web design layout, think about your grid and think about how you can take the grid and merge some together for pictures or content or a banner up at the top. And you can see these websites are all working on a grid. And just like when you did your assignment for finding color combinations on websites, you're going to notice when you go in and look at websites that they're all on a grid. Even if you can't see the table or the rows and the columns, they're still done in a grid fashion. And ironically enough, when a grid is broken, that's where our eyes go. So some websites, this one you can see we've got a logo, the red logo over on the left side, and then we have our navigation bar at the top, and we have a lot of pictures. You might show a lot of pictures on your website if that's what you think the audience wants, or you might have more text. It just depends on the need of the audience. Here is another website that's on a grid. So you guys can take a look at this website and look at all the different grid examples. Here's a great one. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns again and 3 rows, but these columns are broken out and this is 2 of the columns and this is 2 and then we have 1 in the center. So our eye likes when we work on a grid and we work with rows and columns. Also, I have on here some sitemap, wireframe, and mockup tools. And so the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is sitemaps. I gave you a link to some sitemap tools, but I also gave you a link to this Bubbleless. And I'll go ahead and open it up. The sitemap tools that you're going to find links to here, if you want to look at those sitemap tools, there are lots of them. There are some that are free trial and they're made specifically for website design. Bubbleless is just a mind mapping tool, but it's going to do sort of what you want it to do anyway. So here's an example of a website that has 4 pages. The home page, an about page, products and services. And when you get to this bubbleless.com, you can click, let me go. It's actually bubble.us, not bubbleless.com. But when you get there, oh, it keeps going to one that I've done. There is a spot that just says start map, and you click on it to start your map. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything so you can see what it looks like when I make it. But you'll start with one bubble and you're always going to have a home page. You can put notes on those pages, and then you have these little plus signs that add children or add bubbles. So I'm going to add a child to that. So if I'm doing my about me and I want to have my family, and I also have another child and I want to have rafting, and another child to that could be teaching. So when we make our sitemap and we don't have many pages of our website, it's fairly simple. But if you make a website, like let's say you were designing the FECC page, there are probably 400 web pages within that website. And in that case, these get really complex. A lot of times people like to use index cards, and they'll use those index cards to try to map it all out and move things around. But you want to start thinking about what your navigation is going to look like. So in your sitemap, all of your little bubbles are your navigation. So for the assignment that you're going to do for me in Chapter 5, your sitemap is going to be fairly small. And the reason being is that you're making a website without very many pages. So your sitemap will look fairly small. When you're finished with your sitemap, all I need you to do is take a screenshot of that, and that's what you're going to submit. So you're going to submit your sitemap by taking a screenshot of it. The next thing that I want to talk about is wireframing. And so there are a lot of different wireframing tools that I've linked to as well. And these are 10 different ones. And you can look at, there's one called Mockingbird, Lovely Charts. When you look at these wireframes, what you're going to notice is that all of your images have an X on them. And then you have little buttons, which is going to be your navigation, and you can put your actual names on. And then your text boxes, you can just put Latin text in there. You do not need to have text. So Latin text, X's for images, but basically what you're doing when you're creating a wireframe is you're just trying to figure out what the general structure of that website is. So in this example, you can see they've got their banner Mashable at the top. They've got some pictures over here and some text, a spot where they have an advertisement and subscribe, and some social media buttons here. So what you're trying to show your client is, hey, I've made a sitemap and my sitemap looks like this. And then if we look at one page of your website, that is going to be what you're going to show. So it's the way your actual structure is laid out. And a lot of these little deals, they have drag and drops. So you can drag and drop all of the different text or buttons or images or labels. But just remember that these are fairly basic and they should not show the design. So a wireframe is only going to show the elements that you're going to have on your page. So an example of this is somewhere. I have it. So an example of this would be here I have a wireframe that I made. You can see that I have the banner here at the top, and then I've got my navigation. I've got some Latin text. I've got an image over here, and then I have my footer. So you might actually make more than one wireframe for your client because you might want to show 2 different styles and 2 different techniques. So maybe one layout you make has an image on the right and text on the left, but the next one has the text on the right and the image on the left, or maybe your navigation goes down the left-hand side of your screen instead of on the top. These are all created using these wireframing tools. Once you create the wireframe, the next step is to actually create the mock-up of what your page looks like. So in this example, you can see that my wireframe has all the structures. So it has my banner, my nav, my text, my picture, and my footer. And then when we go and look at what the mock-up looks like, it has a banner at the top, a navigation, text, an image on the right-hand side, and a footer, which I didn't screenshot in. So that's the difference. Your mock-up just has your elements. Your wireframe has your elements, and your mock-up has the actual look and feel. You do not need to have text in your mock-up like this one. Your text can be Latin in your mock-up. But you want to make sure that your mock-up shows the fonts, the styles, the colors. So I should be able to look at your mock-up, and when you actually make that using HTML and CSS, I should know what it's going to look like. So I've given you guys on our agenda the tools to the sitemaps and the wireframing. With your mock-ups that you do for this next week's assignment, you're going to use Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, PowerPoint, Paint, Word. You can use anything you want. You can use Google Slides. So whatever it is that you use, you can even use HTML and CSS if you feel most comfortable doing that. So whatever way you make your mock-ups are fine. It just has to be done on the computer. So if you're familiar with Microsoft PowerPoint and you know you can make some shapes and put some pictures and put some Latin text in, that's fine. If you are more familiar with like Word or Google Docs, you can use that. But if you know how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, maybe that's good. You could also, maybe you have a program that's already on your computer that you're familiar with. And then also I gave you a link down at the bottom on online tools that verify contrast. So these are sort of checkers. So when you make a website, you can actually look and you can see if the contrast between your background and your foreground is okay. Now let me go over the assignment that you're gonna do this week. I will be posting another assignment tomorrow, which is Thursday, which will be an introduction to Chapter 6. But for Chapter 5, Part 1 is sitemaps, wireframes, and mockups. So on page 238 in your book, you're going to look at number 2, and there's 3 scenarios there. There's a photographer, a quilt, and a doggy daycare, I believe. So you only need to pick one scenario. Whatever scenario you choose, I want you to use a sitemap tool, whether it's Bubbleless or one of those free tools that I gave you links to, and you're going to create a sitemap. So you're going to create a sitemap of what pages you think need to go on the photography webpage that your website you're making, or the doggy daycare, or the quilting. Once you make that sitemap, I want you to take a screenshot of it and save it. And then you're going to move on to number 3, which is using the same scenario that you made your sitemap with. You're going to create 2 sample wireframes for the homepage. So I want you to wireframe out what you think the homepage should look like. And remember, a wireframe does not have colors, does not have fonts, does not have anything as far as images. It's just showing me where all of the elements are going to go. So you're going to make 2 of these, and the reason why you're making 2 is because you want to give your client several options. Once you make those 2 wireframes, the next step is you're going to create 2 mock-ups of the homepage. So these mock-ups need to include colors, fonts, imaging, logos, and you can also use Latin text, which I gave you a link. Your mock-up should look exactly like the final web page will look once you actually make it in HTML and CSS. Now, I do want you to know that for this assignment, you're going to be doing not the about me or the case study. So you're going to be doing the dog, the quilting, or the photography. And we are not going to carry this out into a website. This exercise is just for you to understand what it is, how you make a sitemap, wireframes, and mockups. So you will have 5 deliverables for me: 1 sitemap, 2 wireframes, and 2 mockups to match the wireframes. Once you're finished with that, you're going to submit all the images to the Chapter 5 assignments folder. And then part 2 is you're going to create a Google Doc name Chapter 5. You're going to share it with me at drauscher@fecc.edu, and you're going to answer questions 4 and 5 on page 239. So that is a little introduction on Chapter 5, and like I said, tomorrow I will be posting some more information about Chapter 6, and you'll have a short lab assignment to go along with that. And if you have any questions, like always, make sure you contact me, let me know, and I would be happy to help you. Thanks.